every single one of us, including you, we're searching for what I call a proper human diet. We're looking for a diet that will help us reverse chronic medical conditions, get rid of overweight or obesity. And in going on that journey, all of us individually, we all trip and fall over things that we think are important, like, oh, satiety, I bet that matters. Nutrient density, oh, I bet that matters. Carbohydrate count, I bet that matters. And so I've got a good special guest with me today, and hopefully we'll have a couple of other doctors joining us later in the show. And we're going to be talking about satiety per calorie. And this is a concept that's really been promoted by my two friends, Dr. Ted Neiman and Dr. Andreas Eenfelds. And they have come up with this model, and they actually have an app that they will sell you for $13 a month to help you understand this and apply this to your health. Now, the problem I have with this is, my question I have with this is this based on good hard science, or is this just like me and you? Are we just looking around and finding concepts that seem to make sense and then applying them in kind of a global overall system? So let me bring my guest on. This is Dr. Nick Norwitz. Nick, welcome back to the channel. You've been here several times. I've been watching with interest your interactions with Dr. Ted Neiman and Dr. Andreas Eenfeldt on Twitter, X. And it's kind of gotten a little heated at times, not so much on your end, but on their end. And then also their followers are the ones who are really getting kind of a little emotional about this. So let's talk about satiety per calorie and the overarching concept and whatever science may support it.
Right. I'll frame this up by saying, I mean, you said not on my end. I will say I released a video yesterday, and it's the spiciest and most, I'm going to say air quotes, direct I've ever gotten. I will be fully transparent. I use the terms scam and pseudoscience, which are strong terms that I don't throw out flippantly, but use with their intentional weight. And to understand why requires a little bit of background. Basically, I don't know, it's been almost 2 years probably now. Diet Doctor, Andreas, CEO of Diet Doctor, was spinning off this different idea, which was supposed to be more diet agnostic, satiety per calorie. And the high level overview was that if you focus on the things that keep you full longer, satiety, and that, in ratio it to calories, you basically get more fullness bang for your calorie buck. And that might be a useful tool for weight loss. Now, I'm all for whatever works for any individual. I use a ketogenic diet therapeutically for ulcerative colitis because that worked for me. If you do well on a plant-based vegan diet, satiety per calorie focused diet, I don't care how you as an individual achieve success. I will applaud that. Let me be clear. So this isn't a matter of diet tribalism defensiveness. But there's a difference between having a nice abstraction, a nice heuristic, a nice tool or toy for someone, something like mindful eating, and then operationalizing it into a scientific model. And what's been really unfortunate is to see how they've taken what I think is a decent concept and abstraction and executed on it not only poorly, but dishonestly in what I think is a harmful way that lacks intellectual integrity. So this has been, to be clear, an ongoing discussion for well over a year. I've debated the CMO, Ted Neiman, on this topic before. And really, I haven't seen any growth, and I've seen deterioration towards what I think are harmful claims, which we will go through, or some of them, some examples we'll go through in this conversation. And I'll just kind of try to unpack what I think is, if anything, a useful case study in how you can, manipulate messaging to put this, what is a good idea and a good abstraction, into something that I think is actively harmful to science, to intellectual integrity, and potentially people. Yeah. So, yesterday I put out a video that was a little spicy, and
it was a little spicy and quite entertaining. And I've got a link to that in the show notes on the YouTube. If you're watching this on X, the link's on my YouTube live. So I have this system that I call a proper human diet, and there are 13 principles of a proper human diet. And many, many people have followed that and had drastic improvement in their overall health. Now, I'm very clear that this is a hypothesis. This is a kind of an overarching theory of what humans should eat. At no point do I say that this is scientifically proven. At no point do I imply that. And then also, anytime I talk about research that supports what I say, I immediately provide a link to that research in the show notes so that either a person or that person's healthcare provider can check that research out and go, yeah, this makes sense. I see how he used that, or this is complete baloney. This is a research study about model airplane aerodynamics. Why would he link to that? Right. And so, but the problem I have so far with the HAVA.co, that's the app, and then with the Dr. Neiman and Dr. Enfeld's proclamations on social media, is they are implying that this is based on the science. This is based on the best available randomized controlled trials in humans. And my initial knee jerk was, how many of those kind of studies do you have? Because they're typically super, super rare. And so we've got slides that we're going to show you guys. And whenever Dr. Norwitz is ready, we'll pull those up and we'll jump into this.
Yeah, let's jump into it. And we can
everybody has opinions. Everybody has hypotheses about what's the best diet. What should you eat? What should you avoid? And that's fine. Everybody should have that. We're all bumping around in the dark trying to rediscover what is a proper human diet, because I think after decades of big pharma, big food, and religion and other inputs, we've become thoroughly confused about what humans should eat and what they shouldn't eat, what's real human food and what's not. So I'm not faulting our friends for having an opinion. I'm not even faulting them for trying to put it together in an app and charge $13 a month. All that's fine, but you cannot imply that this is based on science and then not share the link. And,
well, it's based on science is a tricky thing. We're going to get into the details. Basically, where I wrap the video, I start by trying to steelman them, and I will show you exactly how I quoted my steelman, so you can evaluate for yourself if you think it's a fair steelman. And I end with saying, here are 4 simple things you can do. Simple things. 3 of them cost you nothing. And I will take down the video and all the critical tweets as of late. Like, I have been pushing them to improve. I've been trying to give feedback. They've been, I think, I would use the word rude. They've used the word against me as well. So I guess, differing opinions there. But again, it's differentiating between, you can use this heuristic, this abstraction, fine, but they are making pseudoscientific claims. We'll give examples of those that are based on a dysfunctional scientific approach that will always perpetuate these problematic claims. And I think that, the lack of intellectual integrity there, which we will demonstrate with evidence from their app, is a slippery slope. And I draw a line there. So anyway, I think we can get into it. And I think it's a good case study in how manipulative marketing can be. Oh, and if you watch my video, pay special attention to marketing tactic 4, because I think it's one you see everywhere, even beyond the diet space, once you're looking for it.
I love it.
Anyways, with that, we can get into the slides.
All right, let's do it.
I'll just read this because this is how I open my video. It's my steelman of satiety per calorie. So I say this in the video. This is like what I think the best case is. If you focus on eating more of the foods that keep you satiated, you'll eat less and lose weight. And if you have excess weight to lose, this could improve overall health. SPC is a model that aims to be diet tribe agnostic, assigning composite scores to foods based on variables thought to promote satiety, including higher percent protein, more fiber, and being less hedonic. And the ratios this to caloric content of the food in the denominator. So ultimately, you aim to eat more of what keeps you satiated, so you get more basically satiety bang for your caloric buck. People can evaluate whether they think that is a fair attempt at a steelman, but that is my impression. When I heard this concept for the first time, I'm like, this is the best case I can make for it. And honestly, as a heuristic, it's not a bad idea. So we'll start there. What's the next slide? Okay. So I had updates, but we'll just jump to this one. This is where we are now. And bear in mind, this is after a couple years of supposed iteration where they're making claims. Now, they have a score that is a quantified meter, from 0 being worst SPC, most obesogenic, according to them, to 100 being best. And they've continued to make these absurd claims. Now they have this scoring system, so you can compare things head to head, and it makes a claim about what is most satiating per calorie, and therefore, according to their model, although I think even this is a little bit of a leap, what is more obesogenic, with lower scores being more obesogenic and higher scores being better for leaning out. And more recently, they've jumped towards saying they're equating weight loss and obesogenicity to metabolic health. So now it's basically a higher score is better for your metabolic health. You can see Andreas's tweet from May 28th. He was asking what is the best ice cream for weight loss and metabolic health. So these are their claims based on their recent scores after now near 2 years of iterations. And you can see what the scoring system says. It says Arctic Zero chocolate peanut butter ice cream, Halo Top ice cream are much better for your metabolic health. You can see his tweet than ground pork, than olives, than avocado, than all nuts. And you can evaluate whether or not you think that is a suitable claim. Now, to be clear, the silly examples, they catch your attention. They're actually not my core issue with satiety per calorie, but the fact that they're still producing scores like this after years of iteration, because what they like to say is, oh, it's a work in progress, and we're taking feedback, and we're tweaking the algorithm. That's one of their go-to defenses. In fact, after my video, Andreas, even though I said this was their defense, around 6 minutes in the video, they say this kind of thing. Off the bat, that was one of his defenses. Like, they keep on going back to this, it's a work in progress thing. Well, it's been a couple of years, and you're still producing results like this, and it's always going to produce results like this because the underlying science behind it, the scientific approach, is dysfunctional. And now I want to kind of unpack that. But you know, take a screenshot of this in your head, because this is what they're producing. And to be clear, this isn't like me trying to defend low carb. I called them out when they were scoring pepperoni pizza as better for weight loss than watermelon. And this isn't low carb versus not low carb, animal based versus not animal based. This is just utter nonsense.
And so I want everybody watching, look closely. So you'll notice there's two different categories of food here. There's naturally occurring foods like fruits, ground pork, olives, nuts. But then there's these ultra processed big food products. Halo Top ice cream, which is, I agree, granted it's less bad than the average ice cream you would buy at the store. But for anybody who has had a sugar addiction or a carb addiction like me, I can 100% overeat Halo Top ice cream. I can overeat it way past satiety. Same for Arctic Zero, same for Lily's chocolate. Why do they insist on including these brands? And so that's my immediate red flag, Dr. Norwitz, is that's weird that they keep including these brands, because what I don't want to see, and what I fear that we will see as time goes on, is that they'll establish partnerships, and there'll be some kind of quid pro quo between them and the brands. Hey, we'll recommend your Halo Top ice cream if you recommend our HAVA app. And to my knowledge, that hasn't happened, but that would be my immediate fear, seeing this kind of graphic. And these are their graphics, correct, from their app.
Yes. What I would say in their defense is, one, I don't have any evidence that will be the case. If there's any degree of pay for play. Two, I mean, what Andreas is doing here, and he's done it multiple times, like, what is the best thing to get at Chick-fil-A? What is the best thing to get at McDonald's? What is the best ice cream? It's like, these are popular brands that people buy. So in trying to provide a tool that has utility, and honestly trying to build their company, which that in and of itself isn't bad, right, I think that's probably, like, I would rationalize that as maybe why he's including brands, and wouldn't jump to the conclusion of any pay for play. My issue here is with the science, which, again, this is a funny example to kind of, whet your palate. We're going to get in to why their program will always produce problematic results like this, so we can progress. This is just another case. So you can see he has this model for engagement. What is the best blank for metabolic health? You can see some examples. So here, these are, again, like, 2024, summer 2024 examples. It looks like breaded nuggets. This is straight from one of his tweets, are better than fried eggs, better than ground pork, better than egg yolks. Oat milk and egg yolks are about the same. Pepperoni is apparently terrible. I'm not sure why pepperoni is so terrible. It's definitely like less than half the score of nuggets. So those were Chick-fil-A nuggets, I believe. But this is the reason I have this is like, this is within category, you could say, except for the oat milk. Discard the oat milk for a minute as a reference point. But like, this would be like what animal-based proteins. So he's talking about metabolic health, what's best for metabolic health. And they're claiming nuggets are better for metabolic health than a fried egg, which is better than ground pork, which is better than egg yolks, which apparently suck. And egg yolks apparently are worse, now you're going cross category, than Halo Top ice cream. And it's not even that, here's the thing. We'll talk about shifting the burden of proof. It's not even that it's impossible that in some contexts, Halo Top ice cream couldn't be a better tool for people than egg yolks. I'm not making the claim that that's not a possibility, but they're making the claim. They're making the quantified claim that X is better for weight loss and metabolic health than Y. So they're claiming nuggets are better for metabolic health than a fried egg, better than egg yolks. And that's a claim that, you know, I just don't think is defensible. And I'll try not to get emotional. I'll just say I don't think it's defensible. And they're putting that forth and making these claims. You'll see just how strongly they're making these claims when we show some other tweets.
Yeah, and I think anybody that's following a proper human diet, when you see the score of egg yolks of 39 versus Chick-fil-A nuggets, fried in vegetable oil, breaded with probably wheat, gets almost double the score. Anybody who understands the principles of a proper human diet is going to say, how are they arriving at this number? And so for those of you just joining, the higher the number, the more satiety per calorie, according to Dr. Neiman and Dr. Eenfeldt, and the better it is for a diet food, weight loss food, health improvement food.
Yeah, better for metabolic health, according to their tweets. Now, again, these are just examples. Let's unpack why it's so problematic scientifically. So here's a short list, a problem list. First, their scoring system, they pretend it's scientific. They say it's, quote, based on the best available evidence. And so what they do is they take these, what they assume to be directionally correct components for satiety, which I'm not against. So they say like higher percent protein is generally better for satiety. In general, I agree with that. And I would say the data tends to say that. They say that more fiber is better for satiety. I think that's fine. I'm fine using that as a claim, as a lever. But then what they do is they add on something called the hedonic factor, which they say is scientific. I think it's a little bit made up how hedonic something is. Then they compile those, ratio it over calories. And what you're doing there, there's a few things going on that are wrong there, but you're including first arbitrary variables, which if you click on 339, you probably can get a clip of Ted admitting fully. Can you click on that? Will it play?
No, I don't think so.
All right. Well, you can go to the video. I take the excerpt out of Ted from our debate saying very directly the hedonic score and the weighting of variables is completely made up and arbitrary. And they're core to satiety per calorie. So there's already major arbitrary variables that are included in satiety per calorie, which they tweak at will. Like earlier on, I noted that apple juice, just plain sugary apple juice, or maybe it said unsweetened, but it was like high sugar apple juice, or just apple juice, was the same score as pepperoni pizza. Immediately, they're like, all right, changing score, apple juice is bad now. That was his reply, which just shows how arbitrary it is. You can just go in and tweak it as you want. So that's probably
you're saying based on a feedback or a complaint on Twitter.
It was my complaint. They responded to my feedback.
They immediately went in and changed the score of that food.
Yeah.
But
his tweet was changed algorithm in brackets. Apple juice is bad now. Same day. It might have even been like same. I don't know if it was same hour, but it was like immediate.
It doesn't sound very scientific, Dr. Norwitz.
So let's move on. That's one problem. I think another problem is it ignores metabolic adaptation. This is a screen grab from a tweet, but basically what you're looking at here was data from a study where you're switching diet order. In fact, you know what? I think that the tweet screen grab's more confusing. You can read the paper that's linked in the PubMed ID there. But basically, the idea is they're focusing on what keeps you full acutely. That's my impression of the studies they're drawing from. They don't tend to share the studies in detail, but just the idea that what you eat like right now and how it affects what you eat at lunch is going to translate into whether or not something is obesogenic or good for metabolic health is a flawed assumption because adaptations to dietary shifts take time. So their score actually has a bias against low carb because it doesn't allow for the beneficial metabolic adaptations that occur with carbohydrate restriction. So that's that point. I just think it's a good broad point. Metabolic adaptations take time. Their scoring system does not account for this. So is missing a big bucket of basically nutritional endocrinology. Moving on. Ignores key ingredients. So for example, they rank basically all pure fats basically similar. So pure olive oil, pure ghee, extra virgin olive oil, ghee, tallow, and fryer oil basically rank the same. Andreas's response to this recently was, well, we don't have evidence that different pure fat sources affect satiety differently. Therefore, they're ranked the same. That's the retort.
Right. And I've actually heard my friend Dr. Ted Neiman say more than once that animal fats like butter and beef tallow and lard are just empty calories, and which I actually it's probably been a year ago, but I retweeted like the nutrition info for butter, like it is full of vitamins and minerals. It's not just empty fat calories. But I didn't receive a reply, and I haven't heard him amend this in any way. Butter is very nutritionally complex and very full of nutrition, but they just count it as empty calories, empty fat calories.
Actually, I pressed him on what empty calories was, because empty calories, this is beyond them. It's just a term I don't really like because I think it's really kind of like hand wavy. It's like a balanced diet. It's like, what does this actually mean? What does empty calories mean? He then went on to define it as consuming a nutrient beyond what is essential. Basically, like it's like excess intake beyond what is essential. So by that definition, like if you're hitting your RDA of protein by 0.8 grams per kilogram, and then you eat salmon, which has, protein beyond what is essential protein, and has EPA and DHA, which are technically non-essential nutrients,
right?
You get your ALA from walnuts, then is that empty calories? Again, it's just, maybe I'm being overly academic right now, but you throw a term out like that, you need to actually understand what you're talking about. And it was one of those throwaways, which they tend to do a lot, hand wavy throwaways, without properly thinking through the consequences of what they're saying. So anyway, you can evaluate for yourself whether or not you think it's fair to score equally for metabolic health, since that's the claim they're now making on repeat. They're equating a higher SPC score to what will result in better metabolic health, according to their model, that say ghee, extra virgin olive oil, and fryer oil score the same. You can determine whether you think that's appropriate. Moving on. Also in the category of key ingredients, this actually came up yesterday. I think somebody asked about Diet Coke, and then the question was posed in Sweeteners. Anything without, this is Andreas's response, anything without calories has virtually no impact on average daily SPC scores. So they're saying Sweeteners don't really affect satiety per calorie. Now, remember, they're equating better satiety per calorie as a composite of your daily diet to better weight loss and in general better metabolic health. You've seen the tweets. This is like on repeat what they're claiming. So this is a picture from a cell metabolism paper looking at the effects of sucralose. The combo was a sucralose in combination with carbohydrates, like you'd find in a light and fit yogurt, which I don't know how that ranks in satiety per calorie. You can let me know. What is the effect? This is effect on a change in insulin area under the curve. Basically, the study was showing that this zero-calorie sweetener, when combined with carbs, can cause profound insulin resistance. In fact, there was a small trial in adolescents which they truncated because the effect on insulin resistance was so profound. It was like HOMA-IR went from less than 3.5 to over 12.9 with low doses. So basically, this zero-calorie SPC benign thing can have a profound effect on metabolic health. So again, getting back to the picture, you're claiming you're equating SPC to better metabolic health in certain contexts. This is completely ignored. So there's arbitrary components of the factors. There's ignoring metabolic adaptations. You're ignoring variations within macronutrient groups or within like a category. So all pure fats are the same. You're ignoring chemical additives of all types, including sweeteners, which we see here and in other studies do have impacts on metabolic health.
Absolutely. And
no validation.
One thing that I've not heard Dr. Neiman talk about is the cephalic phase insulin response. This is a known thing that occurs in all mammals. And the kind of the preeminent baseline study for this, people swished saccharin water in their mouth and for 30 seconds or 60 seconds and then spit it out. They didn't even swallow it. There was a demonstrable insulin increase from just the taste of that. And so the cephalic phase insulin response, it gets a lot of heat. There's some good research showing that it probably happens with every sweetener, but we don't have a research study for every sweetener. And so then you get things like this where they say, well, it's 0 calories, so it cannot possibly have an effect on your metabolism. And I think that'll be proven false in the future.
Right. I would say my thoughts on the cephalic phase insulin response are in magnitude. It's pretty low compared to something like, you know, eating carbohydrates. And in general on sweeteners, I'm not anti-sweetener. I think it's actually this is a topic for another discussion. It's a very interesting area because, again, we like simplicity. We like heuristics. So people like to say, oh, 0 calories, there can't be a free lunch. It must be bad. Or 0 calories, it must be benign. I think that's both oversimplified. Or natural versus artificial, also oversimplified.
Yes.
Actually, in this paper, what you see is the middle group, LCS, that's low-carb sweetener. That's the sucralose alone without carbohydrates in context. So if you don't have it with a mixed meal or it's not like mixed into yogurt, and you can see a different response whereby the same sweetener actually will have more profound effects on insulin resistance when combined with carbohydrates. So that context matters. And there's a whole universe of sweeteners which are incredibly metabolically heterogeneous, just like different fatty acids.
Yes.
And we need to actually dissect the effects they have on metabolism rather than making broad sweeping claims like anything with 0 calories doesn't have an effect on satiety per calorie, then extrapolate towards, therefore, you know, it's metabolically inert. And I know they're not claiming those words exactly, but that impression is strongly given when you're making profound claims like satiety per calorie explains all observable dietary phenomenon, which Ted says repeatedly. And then you're saying better satiety per calorie score, you know, equates towards better metabolic health as implied by Andreas's questions. Again, don't take my word for it. You've seen their tweets now at this point in the video. So that's another problem. This is a short list. The next problem, obviously, they have no validation. Let's just be clear. They've never validated their score. And then, again, big picture, I'm fine with heuristics. I'm fine with whatever works for people. It's when you don't actually have a legitimate scientific approach, and then you couple it with, move on, grandiose claims like this. So, Ted Neiman. This combination, one way or other, explains almost all observable phenomenon related to obesity. Frankly, it does not. It does not even come close. So stop making grandiose claims like this, pretending that your model is the best, most scientifically legitimate, you know, consistent with all the data model, when frankly it isn't. And I think it's very problematic when people make, especially people who purport to be experts and healthcare practitioners, profound claims like this that they can't substantiate, or claims about the data set that are directly falsifiable, but they make them with such gusto that people believe them. So Ted has said things about the carbohydrate insulin model, like the postprandial energy deficit in the blood is mystical. He said that in an interview with Brett Scher. Brett can tell me if I'm wrong, but I remember watching that interview, and I've asked him about this before. And he said, like, that phenomenon was mythical. And I'm like, are you sure? And he doubled down. I'm like, here's an RCT showing it's not mythical. You just didn't read the RCT. So if you haven't read the literature and you aren't abreast of it, stop making these profound claims that can't be substantiated. And if you have a heuristic, fine. But don't say your model can explain almost all observable phenomenon related to obesity when it doesn't even come close and you have no science that is actually validating your model. You can go to the next slide. It's a pattern. And this is actually back from 2021 because he's been doing this kind of thing all along. Effortlessly explains all observable phenomena in the diet space. I could come up with a list of 50 things. Like, this is just profoundly falsifiable and arrogant. And this is actually one of the core problems, is that you're trying to sell what you have as a universal model with zero humility and really not any good science. You're not just taking what could be a decent abstraction and a useful tool for people, and marketing is that. and teaching people the principles. If you want to teach them about why better percent protein is better or why more fiber is better in your opinion, that's fine. Please, by all means, do that. I'm not against that. And I also will completely acknowledge, like, I think the PE diet, like, people have said the PE diet helps them. And I believe that as an abstraction. Like, I think it's a fine abstraction. It grates against me, though, as an intellectual, to see comments like this when he really doesn't understand the science, frankly. This is just some irony. The confidence, this is Andreas, the confidence seems to be inversely proportional to the evidence. I see a lot of confidence here and zero validation. Just going to leave that there. Now, I think it's worth, these are some things I highlight in the video, the marketing playbook, because I really thought a lot about, if I'm going to do this video, what is the value add? Because I'm not just trying to troll satiety per calorie. So I wanted to highlight the issues. I wanted to offer them, you know, I wanted to like poke them in order to step up and say, this is what you have to do to get the video removed. I'm happy to take it down. This isn't, I'm not doing this for me, but also use it as a case study, because a lot of the techniques they use to sell their product are just, you know, case like classic marketing tactics. So one thing I think we see a lot of now is anti-diet culture virtue signaling, in particular keto bashing. It's an easy way to build social media points. So a common thing you'll see, even when I'm like, okay, this, say they were scoring watermelon again, better than pizza. I'm like, this is a problem. They will immediately go to, well, you're low carb and you're just being like a keto cultist. I'm like, that's not the problem, but it is a go-to comeback repeatedly. So
Sure.
Ted, sure. SBC was inspired by my abject failure as a former dogmatic low-carb paleo keto carnivore cultist. Strong words.
Sure.
That's a common technique. Moving on.
And so let me just tell all 2,400 viewers, Dr. Eenfeldt and Dr. Neiman were both invited to be part of this. I emailed both of them the link to join. And I think Nick sent them a direct message on X with the link also to join the live stream. And I'm keeping an eye. If either one of them join during this live, they'll absolutely be brought on, and they will have a chance to rebut everything that they disagree with that we've talked about so far. Next slide.
I invited them to speak yesterday. Today I tagged them in. So appeals to vague high-level RCTs. So again, this is where things can get deceptive, where they like talk about, we have all these great RCTs. And remember earlier you said you would have given Andreas like the perfect bait for Andreas, where it's like, they say it's based on evidence. Well, it's technically based on evidence, because what they'll say is, well, their data on percent protein and their data on fiber. We've now gone over why that's insufficient for the claims they're making. And on top of that, they might throw a study here or there. I remember they threw out one Hall study. Ironically, it was a study that we then did a reanalysis on and showed it had fatal flaws.
Right.
But aside from that, like, they talk a lot about their awesome evidence, but they've never just gone and said, okay, here are the studies we're basing our score on. Just show me your work. Start, like he said, we have the best RCT evidence multiple times. Just then publish the composite of your references. Start there. That will be a very simple thing you could do. Show your work. What are the studies that you're using? And also, how are you extracting data from them? So stop hand-waving and appealing vaguely. Show the work.
And as I said earlier, Dr. Norwitz, very often there are no RCTs in humans on these types of questions, especially about individual foods like Halo Top ice cream. There are not any randomized control trials. And so then to say that what we're doing here is based on the best available human RCT evidence, well, if there are no studies at all, no RCTs, then you're still basing this on the best available because there are none available. That's kind of like the food pyramid being based on the best available nutrition evidence. Well, if the best available nutrition research is crap, that's not really a bragging point.
Well, I mean, my broader point is just show your work so it can be fairly evaluated.
Absolutely.
But to that extent, so you're right. You're never going to get an RCT on Halo Top ice cream versus egg yolks for metabolic health outcomes. However, so I wouldn't hold them to that standard.
Right.
Per se, but they are making a claim with their score, not showing their work, and then a very easy marketing tact. And this is number 4, which I kind of dissect a little more in the video. So you can just skip to that if you want, is shifting the burden of proof. So if they make a claim, I remember this happened. I'm paraphrasing here, so I'm not quoting, but I remember, you can go back because we're not at distraction humor yet. But I don't have, so they were talking, they had a score previously that was, they had a protein berry ice cream, like a high protein berry ice cream, and it scored like in the 80s, which was better than like wild salmon. So they were claiming with their score that their, protein berry ice cream was better for weight loss than just plain fresh salmon. And I'm like, this is absurd. And the reply was effectively, this was a while back, but the reply was effectively, well, keep an open mind. How do you know that's not the case? And that, though, I mean, that is a brilliant marketing tact that falls into, like, in science, you can't ask somebody to disprove a negative. So right. The analogy I use in my video is kind of goofy, but it's like, Ken, if I claimed to you, there is a pink platypus on the back of Neptune who only eats square bananas, and you'd be like, Nick, like, what? And
I would say to you, that's an extraordinary claim. You need to prove that.
And I'm like, well, prove me wrong. How do you know I'm wrong? I mean, that's a hyperbolic example, but that's effectively shifting the burden of proof, where a person makes a claim and then kind of shift to say, well, why don't you prove me wrong? You're the one making the claim. You should have to substantiate it. But it plays well. You can see how it plays well. It's like, well, our score predicts this, and our score is based on these, directionally correct RCTs. So why don't you keep an open mind? You see how they place all those SEO virtue signaling terms, and in short form, it can come off as great. But scientifically, it's rubbish. And then the last thing is distraction humor. I highlight this one because I put out the video, and I actually ended my tweet. I'll just say, you can read my tweet with, people are gonna reply. Now, I've given you a playbook of marketing tactics, 1 through 5. They're gonna reply. See if you can categorize the replies into the categories. And in the video, I say Ted likes to use distraction humor. What is Ted's first response? Well, we've done this already, this being the debate. And Nick is still weaponizing whatever meager snippets, I'll talk about his meager snippet in a moment, he can get against SBC in his macadamia affiliate code-fueled righteous crusade against the charlatans of evil, aka myself and Dr. Enfeldt. So, playing into distraction humor, not addressing any of the core arguments, attacking me for eating macadamia nuts. By the way, the meager snippet he's referring to was the snippet of him saying that the hedonic score and the weighting are made up. The irony of this reply is it's one of the most accurate things he said recently, because technically I do eat a lot of macadamia, so I guess I'm macadamia fueled. I did use a snippet of him claiming that the hedonic score was made up and the weightings were arbitrary. Now, I wouldn't say they're evil. That's his words. But, I mean, compared to some of the other things he said, this is not a completely inaccurate claim. But this is his out-of-the-bat retort. Again, he's been given the opportunity to talk to me yesterday after his clinic, which ended between 6 and 7. I said I'd make myself available after. He wanted to spend time with his dog and his wife. That's totally reasonable. He was invited today to show up. And anyway, this was his out-of-the-gate response to my video. You can evaluate its quality, and based on what we've gone over thus far, if you think it stands up to replying to the arguments levied.
And let me tell anybody watching this on the replay, this was actually filmed on Saturday. And so it's possible that Dr. Neiman has Saturday clinic hours. I'm not sure, but most doctors don't. And I'm keeping a close eye in case either of the doctors join. I'm going to bring them up immediately. So I'm hoping that either Eenfeldt or Neiman will show up. I love how he ties you to big macadamia, Dr. Norwitz. Is there anything you need to disclose? Are you bought and paid for by big macadamia?
I have, my first ever partner was House of Macadamia, because since I went keto, that's been one of my favorite foods. So the way look, realistically, we mentioned this at the beginning, it's fine to have like business deals. Sure. I don't knock them for that.
Sure.
And for me, now I'm growing, I'm taking on sponsors. So I approached House of Macadamia because I've been eating their product for 5 years. And I'm like, I genuinely like your product, and I'm only going to be partnering with people that I actually believe in. Do you want to have a partnership? So yes, I like macadamia. They love to throw that in my face. If you Google, like, if you go to their pages and look at how many times they wrote like Nick Norwitz and macadamia, it comes up all the time. So yeah, I do eat a lot of macadamia. I have a macadamia shirt here somewhere. Wait a minute.
I think that very few of our viewers would fault you for having an affiliation with a naturally occurring food versus Halo Top ice cream, which they seem to be very fond of promoting.
Yeah, well, I think I promised some of the commenters that I wouldn't promote macadamia, so I apologize for this. It's my macadamia monster T-shirt. So yeah, no, I mean, like, I eat macadamia nuts, it's fine. And you want my disclosures? I'm happy. I'm a pretty transparent person, so I have a discount code. I'm not going to tell you what it is here because I think that's a little too promotional, but I get 20% of sale. Like, I can tell you that. That's fine.
And
I'm not
knowing you like I do,
do you know how much money I make? You know what my salary is?
$14 probably.
I'm paying tuition. I actually paid my tuition today. Second to last check. But it's painful. Yeah, no, I'm not spending your macadamia money on a Ferrari or anything. In fact, I for my last year, I moved back into my parents' house to save a buck because I have some endeavors. So this is why I'm in my childhood bedroom. So yes, I'm selling macadamia nuts. It's nice to have some dollars to take my girlfriend out to dinner. No, I'm not buying a Ferrari. And if you want to hit me for, you know, liking macadamia nuts, then go ahead, Ted. Feel free. But again, I think you're kind of missing the points of the key arguments that are being raised with respect to your model and your claims that satiety per calorie and prior to that PE explain all observable dietary phenomenon, which they frankly do not. They just don't at all.
I agree.
All right.
So now let me tell everybody this. Dr. Norwitz, there's a link to his video in the show notes on the YouTube version of this. If you're watching on X, it's not there. He has promised to take this video, which is quite salty. He's promised to take it down if Dr. Eenfeldt and Dr. Neiman do 4 things. And what are your asks?
Any of 4 things. Not all 4. Any one of all.
Okay.
Basically, 2 of them have to do with transparency. So more or less public sharing all your, all the studies off of which you are basing satiety per calorie and showing your work. How are you actually getting this score? Because based on, like prior things where they just tweak the algorithm at will, when Ted tweaked the apple juice score, as soon as I commented on it, I really don't think there's proper methodology here. So one thing, or this is kind of coupled into 2 things, but like show your work was, the one thing clearly and have it be actually valid. It can't just be like some hand wavy nonsense. And in addition to that, like show like a record of how you were changing things and when. So if you have a full record of like, this is when we changed this factor and this is how we changed this factor and why we did it with rationale, like that would go a long way to appeasing me. Another thing they could do, and this is a pretty simple thing, just market this for what it is. Be humble about what it is. If you want to say satiety per calorie is a tool and we're going to change it from this like strict 0 to 100 quantification to a red light, yellow light, green light system that is within category. And we're going to just, rather than, give a hard score, we're going to say this is, red, yellow, and green light. And here are why things fall into different categories with the data. So protein percent and percent fiber. And here are the principles that you need to understand in order to leverage our approach. You could do that. I think that will be totally fine and potentially useful. And then the final thing is actually to properly validate, which would be an expense for them, which is why I listed as number 4, because the other things don't directly cost them anything unless this manipulative marketing is benefiting their bottom line substantially, and they don't want to give that up. So I've given my feedback repeatedly. I've given them opportunities to step up and just improve their system. I'm not here to just troll arbitrarily. This has been well over a year-long feedback process. This rather spicy video was me codifying my feedback. I've already spoken with Ted live. I have offered to speak with them now, yesterday, today. They are welcome to come to LA if Simon Hill wants to host an additional live podcast with them. Ted, Andreas, and also Adrian's going to be there. We're going to be recording the podcast live for another topic. So they have all the opportunity in the world. if they keep wanting to play the victim and honestly throwing out their defenses according to that marketing playbook and trying to play victim and make me look the villain like they've been wanting to do, then I'm sorry. Like, if your feelings are hurt, this isn't pleasant for me. Like, I sat on this for a long time before deploying this because, and thinking about let's say the brand I want to project, like, I look at people that I want to be like, and I don't want to just be the provocateur. So I am incredibly selective when I release Spicy Nick. And this is probably the spiciest I've ever been, but I felt I needed to do it. And the response has been variable. There have been friends of Ted and Andreas that think I'm very rude, and other people, you can look in my comments, who said this was extremely reasonable. This was very polite. Multiple people have used the word polite. I actually don't know if I would have used the word polite, but you can watch the video and evaluate for yourself if I'm fair. My intent was to be fair and very direct with a little bit of spice. And so, again, they know how to get the video taken down. They know where to find me if they want to talk. I'm not going to do gymnastics to work to their schedule. So like Andreas was like, you know, I'm flexible on Monday, Wednesday, and Friday earlier in the day because he's in Stockholm. I'm like, I'm busy, dude. Like, you've had the opportunities. Honestly, ball's in your court if you want to step up and flex to my schedule. But you've had multiple opportunities. Here are my thoughts. Go ahead and say what you want. So
let me check my email one final time. I sent both Dr. Eenfeldt and Dr. Neiman a link to join this video. I have not received an email back from either one, and neither one has joined this live stream. So it's possible they were busy and they didn't have enough time to schedule this, which is that's fair.
Andreas was active on Twitter after I tagged him to invite him. He did not reply to the invite, but he did comment on somebody else's kind of snarky reply to me with a target symbol. So like, he saw it and he chose to reply with an emoji, but not reply to the actual invite. So
very interesting. It's always fascinating to me how human nature plays out. We should all attempt to follow the scientific method. And one of the basic tenets is you got to show your work. And only in the big pharma scientific field over the past few years have they not wanted to show their work, and people have a problem with that, and justifiably so. And I think especially in the nutrition arena, if you're going to have claims, you need to show your work, or you need to shut up. And don't claim that you have some scientific validity if you're not going to show your citations. And show that this has been verified, this has been validated, or hey, this is just my hypothesis, which is fine, but just call it that.
Right. Can I actually, I was just combing your tweet to see if Andreas or Ted had replied. I think he's a colleague of theirs. Marty Kendall replied with a question. Okay. That, in fairness to Marty, I want to read verbatim and reply to.
Yeah.
Question for the discussion. Which model is more science-based, he has in quotes, satiety per calorie or carbohydrate insulin model? What further work would do you think would need to be done to understand which model is more useful for the broader population? Unequivocally, carbohydrate insulin model is more scientific. There are multiple randomized controlled trials supporting the carbohydrate insulin model and its bold predictions. I can provide citations to those PMID IDs. There are no RCTs actually validating satiety per calorie. We've gone over why the fact that there are directionally correct factors is completely insufficient, which is why you're getting absurd results. Like now, even 2 years after the conception of satiety per calorie, Halo Top ice cream is better for, quote, metabolic health than avocados. As for his question, what further work would you need to be done to understand which model is more useful for the broader population? There's a lot of ways you could design that study. I think if the claims are being made about metabolic health, one study you could do, among many, is take people with obesity and metabolic syndrome, put them on a clean carbohydrate restricted diet for probably 6 months. We could do a feeding trial. You could validate that they're, on a carbohydrate restricted diet, maybe even a ketogenic diet by doing, trig to HDL ratio and BHB levels, and then compare it in RCT form against a satiety per calorie based diet, and see what results in better health outcomes, quite honestly. So there's a lot of studies you could do. And if they want to validate their trial by doing a study like that, I'm inviting that very much so. So,
Absolutely.
I'm only really one experiment away from changing my mind. 2 experiments, if you include validation, from changing my mind strongly. We could suss out the details of a trial. I mean, early on in this process, I offered my help in designing a study very early on in validating satiety per calorie. And this is when I was actually excited about the concept as an abstraction. They honestly quite rudely declined my invitation, said they were working with some bigwigs. I won't name those people. Interestingly, those people haven't chosen to name themselves. But you know what? Marty, Andreas, Ted, if you actually are serious about doing a study, I am more than happy to support it. And more than that, and I've offered this, but I'll offer it again. If Ted or Andreas want to write a perspectives piece, not even do a study, but compile the evidence into a perspective on why satiety per calorie is so great, I can help them get it published. I can help them send it out for independent review. And, you know, when I had offered it, I was running a few, special topics, and I was happy to get the open access fee waived and send it out for, independent review. So like, I've tried pretty hard to offer them like all the opportunities possible. They have not stepped up. Marty, if you would like to collaborate on designing a project and can get funding for executing this randomized control trial, I am happy to collaborate in a team of rivals, so to speak. So thank you for the question.
That's a great offer. One of our PhD coaches, Coach Roxana, actually saw the presentation where Dr. Eenfeldt presented this. First presentation in Denver looked so convincing, but it will never work for emotional eaters and sugar addicts. Been there, done that. And that's one of my main problems when you're trying to say that, oh, you know, this ice cream or this highly processed food that has multiple ingredients and included sugar. There are people who are sugar and carbohydrate addicts, and there are people who are very emotional eaters. That's never going to work for them.
Oh, actually, Andreas did reply to your post.
He did. Okay.
Yeah, he posted a shrug emoji. That was the extent of the reply.
The shrug emoji. Still no
shrug emoji. That was it.
Okay, no email reply back. And
so he's aware. They're very aware that this is happening.
Okay. So, and he's also active enough to send a tweet. So I'm not sure why they chose not to join us today. They had ample opportunity. Also, I'd like to extend an invitation, and I think Dr. Norwitz would agree, if they want to schedule this in the future and have a discussion, not a debate, not a yelling match, but a discussion about the science behind all this. I'm happy to moderate that, and I'm sure Dr. Norwitz will be happy to attend.
I'm happy to attend. I honestly, like, as I said before, I'm not going to bend over backwards to try to fit their schedule. Honestly, this has been an ongoing pain in the butt. So if they want to like show up on an impromptu thing, be it a Twitter live spaces, be it a live with you, again, I mean, I've offered them multiple opportunities. It sounds like they're inclined to do the live with Simon, which for optical purposes, no offense, Ken, but I think they're gonna, like, there's always a way to spin it as Ken's low carb and Nick's low carb, or Nick eats low carb, and therefore this is a biased platform.
Yeah.
So we had the opportunity to come today. It's Saturday. It's in the evening for Andreas. He's clearly up,
right,
and active, so he could have shown up. He doesn't want to. If there is a good time that works for all of us, but like, a Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, midday is not going to just be workable for me. So.
And also, let's be very clear, dietdoctor.com, which Dr. Eenfeldt created and still runs, for a minute, they were trying to implement the HAVA, the satiety per calorie, on the Diet Doctor website, and they got so much kickback that they stopped doing that and actually issued a release on Diet Doctor and said, hey, the Diet Doctor is just going to remain low carb. So it's a bit disingenuous when Dr. Eenfeldt especially says, well, you guys are low carb, therefore you can't be objective, but he's still making a substantial income from dietdoctor.com, which is still a low carb site. So I'm not sure how he would feel alienated by having a discussion with us, who also believe in low carb, as he evidently does, because he charges $5 a month for dietdoctor.com.
Right. Well, actually, what I'll say is I was looking through, I mean, as is YouTube comments are always going to be some spicy ones, but I think there was a fair volume of comments, a pattern I noticed on the video itself, that were at some level singing the praises of Dr. Enfeldt for the work he's done at Diet Doctor.
Absolutely.
Now, I don't know him that well personally. So
yeah,
while this gets spicy, this isn't actually personal with respect to Ted and Andreas. They could be stand-up guys. This is about their science. And a lot of people were basically like, Dr. E was great at Diet Doctor. I'm so disappointed and confused about this. So one person, Cat Sal141, 14 hours ago posted, "Thanks, Nick. On point and polite as usual." That's her words. I wouldn't necessarily actually call what I posted polite. It's probably the spiciest I've ever been. Dr. E was so vital in contributing to metabolic health previously. Yes. I wonder why he has taken off on this strange tangent now. There were a lot of comments like that. Some people actually saying, here, this was MRRPGSWE 8931, 13 hours ago. Dr. Enfeldt, I think he's spelled his name wrong, kind of saved my life many years ago by convincing me to enter the LCHF world. Diet Doctor with Brett Sure was amazing. 50,000K subscribers and fantastic content. I still think Andreas wants to make good, but has jumped into a rabbit hole. And then he says something about the subscriber number. A positive interpretation is that HAVA wants to bridge the gap between vegans and carnivores, but as Nick points out, lost much of the science along the way. Maybe Nick's comments can push Andreas and Ted back towards a more realistic pathway. Keep up with a good job, Nick. Now, that's not me just trying to I could have just picked out fanboys, and fangirls, but a lot of the comments were giving Ted and Andreas credit for the work they've done. And again, this isn't personal, but that good deeds don't, justify what is pseudoscience.
Well, there's actually a case to be made that you could generate all this goodwill doing this certain thing and then misuse that goodwill doing something else. There are many examples of that in the history literature. That's a very common tactic. I'm not saying that they've done that, but I will agree with your viewers' comments. Dr. Eenfeldt with dietdoctor.com was a huge influence on probably millions of people, encouraging them to adopt and stick to at least a low carb, if not a ketogenic diet. And he'll always have my respect for that. I've met him several times. I've done video with him. I've met Ted Neiman twice, I think. We've done video together. I think both of these guys mean well, but I'm afraid that financial considerations have muddied the water just a bit, or at least there's some promise of financial remuneration in the future. That's just my personal feeling. I have no facts to support that whatsoever. I hope that's not true. I hope I'm proven wrong, and I hope we can get a four-way with all these guys together in the near future.
I wouldn't speculate on their financial, the matter here is not what their intent is. It could be great. It could be that they don't care about money and they're living out of a box trying to do the right thing. The fact of the matter is their science sucks. And we just went over why. And it's resulting in something that is being mismarketed, quite frankly, to a harmful degree. And with respect to the people who love Diet Doctor as a resource, this is why I chose to speak up, is because there's a huge population of people who were like, this was my go-to, to point people who were curious about the metabolic health, and they tanked it by going in this bizarre direction. Why? We can speculate, and you have speculated. I don't even think I need to. We just have gone through the arguments. We've gone through the problems. We've gone through what I think are constructive criticisms for growth, whereby they can, quote, have their cake and eat it too. Have the satiety per calorie concept and execute on it in an high intellectual integrity manner that can help people and be appropriate claims to the science they have or don't have, and then grow by actually pursuing validation of their model, which, again, as an abstraction, as a heuristic, isn't necessarily a bad idea. It's not that this is a bad idea at its seed. It's that the execution was terrible.
Yes, I totally agree. Dr. Nick Norwitz, thank you so much for doing this. Any closing thoughts that you want to leave the people with?
I want to I really like, I sincerely, I was sitting on this video for a long time and I was sincerely like, do I want to re-enter this thing? Because I had muted them both. I had tried to ignore them. Weirdly, Andreas tends to tag me in a lot, even after I said like, look, I don't want to be a part of this. It was based on feedback from people who were really frustrated that I chose to do this. I really am thinking a lot about how I project arguments and portray myself. So I apologize to those who see the video, see it as spicy, and think I crossed over a line. I will audit my behavior and reflect on it genuinely. This is the spiciest I've ever been. But having given it a lot of thought, given the history, I think my behavior was necessary, quite honestly.
Yeah, I agree. I don't think you stepped over any lines that didn't need to be stepped over. And I appreciate your honesty and I appreciate your integrity. It's rare these days to see this depth and this level of integrity and ability to self-evaluate and also to self-correct. Many people do not possess those qualities, and I admire you for having those qualities and also being very self-aware that, hey, maybe I stepped over a line. Let me look at this again. So thank you very much, my friend. I appreciate this. You guys are welcome to share this video. And if you know Dr. Ted Neiman or Dr. Andreas Eenfeldt personally, please tell them that this is an open invitation for a discussion, not a debate, not a fisticuff. We're going to have a discussion about the science behind satiety per calorie. And I would love for them to sit down with Dr. Norwitz and let's just talk this out. Thank you, Doc. See you later.